Working for the Pennsylvania State Game Commission was typically a mundane job. Officially, my title was Wildlife Conservation Officer, but most people just called me a game warden since it was easier to say. My duties included ensuring hunters and fishers had proper licenses, were following the rules for their catch, and assisting when wild animals were severely injured or becoming a nuisance in populated areas. Though it was mostly routine, there were occasional moments of excitement, especially when someone got lost in the woods. Those calls were what made me eventually trade in my badge for a desk job. The Game Commission isn't a search and rescue unit, but we get called to help locate lost hikers because we know the terrain. One afternoon, Jenny, another game warden, and I were called to assist local police with a lost child in a dense forest within their jurisdiction. We arrived at the small police station around 4 p.m., where we were briefed in a conference room filled with officers and volunteers. The sheriff pointed to a spot on the map, indicating where a 911 call from a child had been traced. The call cut off abruptly, and there were no missing children reported, so it was assumed her parents were also lost and possibly injured. Paramedics were on standby as we prepared to search. Just as we were about to head out, a disheveled man named Jethro barged in, warning us about an old hunting cabin in the woods where horrible things lived, and the girl would not be alone. The sheriff dismissed him after he shared his cryptic warning, and we set off. Jenny and I reviewed the search area on a map before splitting into 3 groups. The search was slow, as expected, but just before dark, we heard a scream. It was Jenny. I sprinted towards the sound, branches scratching my skin. Jenny was running towards me, blood covering her ripped shirt and sports bra. Behind her was a man in a Halloween mask, wielding a knife. I shouted and drew my gun, but Jenny tripped. The man was on her in an instant, stabbing her in the head. I shot him, but he fled into the trees. Jenny was dead. We couldn't call for help due to no cell reception, and I had lost my walkie-talkie. Despite the group's urge to retreat, I insisted we continue. We found a dilapidated cabin as the last rays of sunlight faded. Inside, the stench of rot was overwhelming. We searched the lower level, calling for the girl, but found nothing. Then, we heard a groan from below. A hidden hatch in the living room floor led to a basement. I descended first, the others following. In the dim, dirt-floored basement, heavy footsteps pounded above. Suddenly, a figure dropped through the opening, brandishing a bloody knife. Before he could attack, a long, pale arm yanked him into the shadows. His screams and breaking bones echoed as we scrambled up the ladder, but the hatch slammed shut. Trapped, we huddled back to back, flashlights darting over old furniture. A creature, over 7 feet tall with a pale, emaciated body and elongated limbs emerged. Its black eyes stared as I fired my gun. The volunteer climbed out, but the creature reached for me. I fled up the ladder, emerging into the living room to find the second volunteer dead, another monster crouched over him. This beast was shorter, muscular, with black skin and red eyes. It spoke, promising more food, as it lunged. We barricaded ourselves in a bedroom, frantically trying to open the window as the door splintered. Then, silence fell. A girl's voice called from outside, claiming it was safe. We emerged to find the pale creature holding hands with the missing girl. When the volunteer shot at the creature, it killed him swiftly. The girl reassured the creature, which told me to take her home. It retreated, leaving us in stunned silence. I led the girl out of the woods, reuniting her with her worried parents. The search for the cabin resumed at dawn, but it was never found again. I reported Jenny's death and the girl's rescue, omitting the creatures. Questioned by investigators, I maintained my story of losing the group while running to help Jenny. Afterwards, I told my boss I'd had enough of field work. Trading my badge for a desk job seemed far safer after that harrowing night in the woods.
Back in the early to mid-2000s, during a summer evening in western Pennsylvania, my friends and I went biking on a local hiking bike trail. We lived in a rural area, and our parents didn't worry too much if we were out past dark, as long as we came home eventually. One evening, just as it was getting dark, we were heading back home on the trail when we saw someone walking towards us. My friend in the front stopped suddenly, staring at this person. We all stopped too, feeling a weird sense of fear even though we couldn't see the person clearly yet. I broke off my gaze pretty quickly and rode right past. At no point did he look up at me or the boy/girl ahead of me. No acknowledgement, no reaction to the speed that we rode by him. Nothing, as if we weren't even there. Then not even 100 feet after we passed this guy, my buddy who was the last of us and right behind me, wipes out. We all stop, look at my buddy, then the figure. The figure has now turned around and is looking at us. He's wearing an old outfit, like 1800s, very early 1900s old. An old helmet with a headlamp that was unlit. His clothes looked ragged and torn from the waist up. He was pale, not like a stereotypical ghost, just like someone who hadn't seen much sunlight in quite some time. His skin looked atrocious, but he also didn't look that old, just like he hadn't bathed or taken care of his hygiene. It was someone I can say I never saw before, and living in such a rural area that wasn't all that normal, at least not at that time of day. The look on his face was that of shock, as if we had surprised him, or that we were as off-putting to him as he was to us. He said nothing, made no noise, just stared in a state of shock, the same as we were presumably. I glanced away to look at my friend and then shot my gaze back, but he was gone. There was no noise to indicate he ran into the woods, which would have been the only means to get out of sight. Even if he had, there's no physical way he could have gotten into them without us seeing, because you could clearly see through the initial brush, and there would have been a ton of noise. But there wasn't. Nothing but crickets and the typical background noise you'd hear, almost dead silent otherwise. My buddy who fell picked up his bike and bolted, and we followed. We were freaked out and pedaled back to my house as fast as we could. I noticed there were no cars on the main road where he could have come from. When we got home, we tried to figure out what happened. My mom thought it might be someone inspecting an old coal mine nearby, but my dad pointed out that there were better ways to get there and that the mines were flooded and abandoned long ago. Even now, years later, we still talk about that night when we get together. One friend has a theory that we somehow encountered a coal miner from the past. He thinks maybe we look strange to the miner, like ghosts from the future. It's an interesting idea, but I'm not sure what to believe. All I know is that it was a really strange and spooky experience that I can't fully explain.
About 7 years ago, I was living up near Carthouse, just me, my dog, and my high school boyfriend. He was at work, and it was about 11 or 12 at night when the dog started whining at the door. I assumed she wanted to go out before bed, so I opened the door, but she backed away from the screen door. This was a young, active German Shepherd. Her before-bed patrol was the highlight of her day, so this behavior was very strange. I fussed with her, getting her hooked up to her run anyway, when something suddenly slammed against my screen door. I fell on my ass, grabbed the dog, who had started snarling and pushing at the door. In the faint light, I could see a canine muzzle, black, and teeth. I hauled myself up and realized that the animal outside was shoulder-high to the middle bar on my screen door. I was sure it wasn't jumping against the door because I could still see the teeth and hear it snarling at about the level of my hip. I slammed the main door shut, my dog still on the lead running under it. We always kept the lead end inside the house. Too many hunters and people who shoot unwelcome dogs to give her a chance to bolt. I could still hear it outside, so I left the dog leashed to keep her controlled. I moved less than 5 feet to the window and saw absolutely nothing. There was nothing at all on the patio. I could still hear it. It hadn't moved away. My dog was now hysterically barking at the door, but there was nothing outside. I turned on the porch light and the noise stopped. The only sound remaining was my dog, still barking her head off. I called my boyfriend. He saw nothing weird when he got home. The dog eventually settled, but never did go out that night. I put down a puppy pad in the garage for her, and I don't think I ever turned off the porch light again.
I hope you found these stories as chilling and unsettling as I did. It's a stark reminder that sometimes reality can be stranger and more frightening than fiction. If you enjoyed these tales of suspense, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-chilling content. This is your host, Nicholas Black. Until next time.